Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Brandley.
And I'm Alicia Coakley. Every member of the church has a story to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others.
On today's episode, we're going to hear how a teenager's stubbornness and search for fun and freedom pulled him away from the church for years until a forever friendship with the right person gave him a glimpse of what true happiness could be. Welcome to Latter day Lights. Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Latter day Lights. We're so glad that you could be here today with us, and we're super excited to introduce to you our guest today, Nick Taylor. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Well, Nick, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I was born and raised in Elko, Nevada, and I lived there until I was finished high school, and then I moved to Reno for a couple years, and I'm back in Elko now, and I'm currently going to school for a bachelor's degree in land surveying and geomatics, and I work for an engineering firm doing survey work. So I spent a lot of time just kind of out in the middle of nowhere surveying, and a lot of time out at the mine sites.
And you're married.
Yep. Oh yeah, and I'm married.
All right, Nick. Well, why don't you tell us about your story?
Okay, so I was born and raised in the church. I attended church all throughout high school. And then right about my sophomore year, a new family had moved into our ward. It was the Pulleys. And I had gained a pretty good friendship with their oldest daughter, Brianne. And we were just really good friends throughout high school. We hung out a lot, went to church together. She was in our ward. And then I decided to date another girl who I ended up like kind of steady dating, and it kind of raised some concerns with my bishop at the time, saying mentioning how we shouldn't be steady dating because of the consequences that it could lead to, and just kind of things like that. And I kind of just felt really off about that at the time, and I was kind of upset that he would tell me that I need to break this off. And I was like, okay, well, I was young and dumb. I was like, I know what I'm doing. I don't need you telling me how to run my life. I got this over control. And so, yeah. And then just kind of gradually throughout kind of my senior year of high school, started kind of falling a little bit more away from the church. I still go to church and everything with my parents. I guess I wouldn't care about what was going on. I was just going to go, not for like the right reasons.
Right. So I have to ask you a question. Have my boys, so Nick is in Young Men's. Have they told you what my rule is for them in dating? Have they complained yet about this rule in dating? Okay.
They haven't.
All right. So I adopted this rule. Scott's going to know who this is from a friend of mine, Jeff Barney. I'm going to give him a little shout out here, right? And the Barney boys, they were told that, they don't really need to be getting into exclusive relationships. Instead, they need to adapt this Ben and Jerry's 31 flavors type of ideal for dating, where they have to date 31 different types of girls before they start getting into relationships, right? And I loved that. I was like, that's perfect, because you know what? You guys got missions and you're going to go off to college, and like, seriously, like teenagers, 99% of you guys who are listening out there, I love you, but you really cannot handle being in a relationship as a teenager, right? And so I have told my kids, all three of them, that when they start dating, they're going to go on group dates when they're 16, and they're going to not get to date one girl twice in a row until they date someone else in between that girl. So I want them to get a variety of what people are like when they're around friends, just to kind of see, because that's the point of dating, right? Is to like figure out what type of person you want to marry, not just who you want to marry, but what type of person you want to marry. And I think that's super important. So, Jack is like, I don't even want to go on a date. Like, he doesn't want to spend money on girls, and I don't know, he doesn't care. Nate, Nate is a Nick. from this story, Nate is like, that's a dumb rule, mom. He wants to be exclusive. He like he just wants to get into a relationship. I'm like, no. So I can see how, as a teenager, you definitely thought you knew better than some old wrinkly bishop, right?
Yeah, teenage boys are stubborn in their ways.
Just a little bit.
Mhm.
Oh, well, so what happened? So how long did you date this girl for? Was it the rest of your high school, or,
It
what
was
kind of?
so it was through high school, from that point through high school, and then into college for a couple years too.
Oh, wow.
And so
Very
it
long
was,
relationship.
yeah, it was for quite a while, and it wasn't necessarily the best relationship. So
Hmm.
there was a lot of issues that needed to be worked out. I was just trying to at that point I was just trying to stick with it. I wasn't going to church at that point once I got into college. Um and so it just created a lot of kind of not harsh feelings, but just feelings that I just didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go to church. Church was on the back burner, but I'd go
Hmm.
to church during the summers when I was back home with my parents. But again, it
Mhm.
was kind of the attitude where I would just go because it was my parents. I think I'd only go to sacrament meeting and that was it. Then I'd go back home.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So what happened? So now you're in college, you're not really going to church. Did you still kind of live the standards of the gospel, just you were inactive, or did you kind of start getting a little more into the world and, you
so
know?
I was inactive. I think I went to church one time while I was in college because I had a friend I that I knew from Elko had asked me to go one day, and so I went. I think I went one time, and that was it. Um, I wasn't really quite living the standards of the church. I would drink and do all the college things, um,
Mhm.
but I never like even throughout this whole period while I was inactive, I never like denounced the church or I'd still stick up for it. Like people would be surprised that I came from an LDS background, and I'd be like, it's they would like kind of make jokes and I'd still stick up for like I might not be practicing, but I still am supportive of it, like my family and all my friends who are. I just don't practice it
Mhm.
at the time.
Right.
And so I broke it off with my first girlfriend there sometime into college, and then I ended up dating another girl who I eventually got engaged to, and we were engaged for a time, and then I ended up breaking it off with her. And almost the second I broke it off with her, I kept having this feeling that I needed to go back to church. Like it was pushing me to where you need to go back. That's what you need to do. That will help you and make you feel better about everything.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
I ignored it for the first month or so.
How long were you inactive?
I It's about 6 years.
What
How
it
did your family react to you being inactive?
My family, like they're still active and they're still supportive of me and showed me that they love me and everything like that. They didn't. My mom would say, "Hey, you should go to church every now and then," but I just wouldn't listen to her. But they they never were like hateful towards me, or they always love me. They're like, "It's your life, it's your choice. As long as you're happy, we're happy." And
Mhm.
so they're still supportive of everything I did. It's just, of course, they wanted me to go to church. I just didn't.
Mhm. Yeah. Awesome. That's great to
Yeah.
hear, because I know that sometimes it goes the opposite. Like, especially with parents, we get so worried about our kids that we tend to like dig in really hard and to push, 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 and not to just let them have their own space. But sometimes, you know, I mean, my kids are still under 18, so I'm gonna dig and push, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know what's gonna happen when they get to go out on their own and get to live life the way that they want to. Scott, you got some older kids, you know? So how do you I don't know. Maybe I'm gonna ask Scott this. how do you find that balance, of like letting them be their own person and still encouraging them to make good choices and not lose your mind?
That's hard. I have my oldest daughter, Clarissa. She's pretty level-headed, so I'm not too worried. My son, that's 19, that's a little more tricky. But I've kind of gone down the road of your parents, Nick, where I just try to tell him that I love him and that I want him to make good choices, and he still is. He's trying to find his way, um, you know. But
Yeah.
it's hard. You just gotta love them and try to support them, but also try to educate them on the paths that could go those darker paths that he should try to
Hmm.
avoid.
Right.
But I had a question for you, Nick. You mentioned that you started drinking, and I'm just asking this because I'm just curious because I don't really get the chance to ask people. But like, I'm guessing that wasn't a temptation when you were active before you left, like kind of left the church, right?
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't at all. And it's
So
just,
how does that start? How do you take that drink? Like, just being an active member, I'm just wondering like how that happens.
yeah. So it was kind of like, so I was in college for a while, and then it just kind of, just the college lifestyle, especially kind of at a bigger university that tends to party a lot. And so we'd go, I'd be hanging out with friends, and it'd just be like, hey, here, have this, try this. And it's like, okay, well, I don't, I haven't done that. And they're like, okay, well, just try it. Just kind of like more of a push. And then you see everyone else doing it. And
Hmm.
so it's just kind of like you take your first sip, and then it just kind of builds on from that.
Hmm.
Okay. So it's kind of like peer pressure in a way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Scott, you don't know this. I've tried it before. Um, I have to say, I don't know how anybody takes a second drink because it's gross. Drinking is great. Even if you have all the fruity things in there or whatever. Like I've tried a couple times in my past, and I don't know how people. I think you just have to plug and chug and just like hope for the best. But ugh. I don't. I genuinely don't know how people drink and enjoy it because it just tastes so nasty.
Yeah.
But it really is, there's this peer pressure thing that happens where it's not even like I felt judged per se. It was just more like I wanted to be part of the crowd. I
Yeah.
think that was for me. It
Mm.
wasn't like I thought that they thought I was gonna be, wimpy or something like that. It was just I just wanted to be a part of the crowd. So I tried it as a teenager, and thankfully it was disgusting enough for me never ever ever to want to do it again. But um yeah, I can see how getting in that lifestyle and just, not wanting to feel like you're left out could kind of push you towards doing things that aren't the best, right?
Yeah. And
Mm.
looking back on that, I don't get it either. And I'll see people who are drinking, like at the rodeo we had here last night, like
Right.
everyone's sitting there drinking, and it just I just feel disgusted. It's just like kind of like, oh, that's gross.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now you've been engaged, but you broke it off. You're getting this prompting to come back. What happens next?
So, like, next step in my story is I had started talking to my current wife, Brienne. We had started talking about a month after I'd broken things off with my ex, and we were just kind of talking and talking. We had known each other for like 10 years at this point, so we've known each other for a long time, and we'd talk every now and then. And we kind of had like a thing, or at least I had feelings for her in high school, and so it was kind of rekindling that little flame there,
Mhm.
going back and like talking to her. And so we kind of started talking more and more, and started kind of dating, not really quite dating yet, but basically. And
Mm.
we had a conversation, and she just laid it out there and said, hey, I'm getting married in the temple. whether it's with you or someone else, I'm getting married in the temple. Uh, she holds herself to that standard, and that's amazing that she does that. And it's a good wakening up point for me. And from there, I started going to church every week. And I was still living in Reno at the time, and she was living here in Elko. And so I'd go to the YSA branch in Sparks there. And it was just this whole process, just getting back into church, and it was fairly easy to get back in the swing of things. I knew what I was doing was right, and so at first it was really scary, kind of going back and talking to the bishop and all on all those things. But after that point, it was super easy, and I just knew that I was doing the right thing.
Did you feel from where you are now? Obviously, you married her in the temple, right? I'm guessing.
Yeah,
Since she wouldn't take anything less, right? So
yeah.
now that you've gone through this entire journey, when you look back and you think of like your testimony before you know, when you were a teenager and then now, like, what does that look like?
Oh, it's my testimony has grown so much, like just exponentially since from when I was in a teenager, and then because us being a teenager, it's like I'm just like kind of going through the motions like all teenagers do. It's you're kind
Mhm.
of really piggybacking off your parents' testimony, but being able to like how I stepped away from the church and brought and got back, it was kind of just strengthening my testimony that was there, that was planted as a seedling from my parents, and being able to grow on that. And it's been really kind of neat 'cause, like we mentioned earlier, I'm in the young men's program for our ward, and so I can see how the young men in our ward, how they're progressing. And we actually had a talk. I gave the lesson today about how like how you make yourself feel better after you've sinned. And so it's kind of good to share my
Mhm.
experiences with them and show them like, hey, it's you're gonna mess up at some point in time. Everyone does. It's just natural. And but like through the repentance process, you can come back and you feel so much better. Like you feel horrible at first, but as soon as you start that process, you feel instantly better.
Mhm. That's awesome.
Does did it feel like you were coming home when you came back? Like,
Yeah, I feel like I was where I needed to be. Like
okay.
everyone was super welcoming and made me feel so at home and so loved. It was I couldn't have asked for a better experience coming back.
That's awesome. How did your I'm curious specifically about your mom. Like how did she take that? Did you tell her that you were going to do this, or did you kind of like wait until you were already like fully back to let her know? Did you just not say anything and just, it's no big deal, mom? Like how did you
Yeah, so
how did you do all that with her?
I I had mentioned that like I'd come back almost every weekend, come back to
Mhm.
Elko to see Brienne while we were dating. And so this is kind of like before I started coming back, and my mom told me, you need to be careful. Like, do not hurt this girl. Do not like she is something else. You need to be careful. And I got to the point like before I even go, I started telling her that I was like, hey, no, I'm going back to church, and I talked to her almost every Sunday, telling her that I'd been to church and talked about like our lesson that we had, and she was really excited and really happy about it. And it always kind of cracks us up because she is really close with Brienne's mom, because you can see
Mhm.
their backyard from our front yard. And so,
Okay.
and both of them like to talk a lot.
Yes, they do.
And so they every time they see each other, they talk about it. So
You know what I love is I love that, part of your story, you kind of got to experience it all. You got to experience going to church and not wanting to go to church, and then like not going to church and not wanting to go to church, and now going to church and wanting to go to church. Like you've experienced all three of those episodes, And so my question is this, of course, because I have teenage boys, I'm constantly worried, right? Like I feel like a lot of youth, especially these days, have this incessant need to be entertained. And so sometimes church is not entertaining, right? Like sometimes if you go with the right mindset, I feel like you can always get something out of it, but it's very hard as a teenager, especially to be in that right mindset and to not feel bored when they're there,
Yeah.
right? So, can I ask you, like, how do you feel that's helped you now as a leader in the young men's? Do you feel like you're able to kind of speak to the young men on their level because you got to be them for a while and you've got to experience both being in and out of the church?
Yeah, so it's really kind of neat that I ended up in the young men because I always kind of thought I would be because I wanted to like because I tell them all the time like there's probably nothing you guys have experienced that I haven't already. I've
Mhm.
I've been through the ringer a time or two, so I tell them that like you can come and talk to me. I know what's going on, but it's it's neat seeing them, and you can just see how they interact in church, and you can tell when they're doing good and when they're kind of down. It just kind of depends on the day, and that's how it is for everyone. But being able to reach out to them, it's a lot easier for me, I think, more than so maybe some of the other adult leaders, just because it's a running joke in the young men's organization that all the other leaders they've been out for a long time. They're like, oh, well, brother Taylor, that was like last year. So I'm not that much older than the young men. I think I'm like 10 years older than the oldest one.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that I was in young men's. And
Right.
so I still have that mentality of a teenager sometimes, like just wanting to goof around and have fun. So I just feel like I can really connect with the young men in our ward and just hoping that they know that they can come to me and I can just help them along with any questions they have and just kind of point them in the right way.
That's
So
awesome.
So I got another question for you. When you were engaged before, um, and you were out of the church, what was your thinking? I mean, knowing that it was outside of the temple, right? Or it would have been. Um, how would like I don't know, like what's your thinking then to now too? Like you've got this interesting life where you've kind of lived both sides. I mean, what did you were you thinking about eternal families, eternal marriage back then? Like were you willing to like were you struggling with giving that up?
at the time I wasn't really thinking about it. It never really crossed my mind. And like my parents, they're still supportive of me, even though it wasn't in the temple. And
Mm,
they might not have been okay with it, but they were so like, this is your life. You can decide. So I wasn't really thinking about it. And looking back onto it, I realized that would have been a huge mistake, regardless of
Mhm.
who it was, just not being married in the temple and being sealed with with your spouse. Because
Yeah.
through just I feel like a large part of our religion kind of goes back to being sealed about through families. And
Mhm.
so not being able to be like thinking back about not being able to be sealed to your family, it's kind of a like, just kind of like a rough experience, like thinking of it like how you won't be able to see them again. You won't be able to interact. And
Yeah.
so do you think living in the world changed your mindset? And
uh, so
okay.
yeah, like living in the world and how the world lives, it's changed the mindset to where it's like no one else gets married in the temple. It's just
Mhm.
that's just how everyone does it. And it's like, oh well, that's how they do it. That's how everyone else does it. And it's just second nature. No one really thinks twice about it. They're like everyone just kind of thinks that, well, it's just while we're alive, right? And so
Mhm.
Right.
they don't quite understand that it goes past that for all
Yeah.
time and eternity. So it's definitely changed my mindset and coming back to the church, looking back on it, it's just been an eye opener seeing how how bad that could have been, like not being
Mhm.
able to be sealed or any of that.
Right. So maybe you have a better appreciation now than for for the temple and
Yeah.
And you don't look back on that time and you're not like ashamed, like, oh no. I mean, obviously, because you're on the podcast and you're telling everyone about your back time. But like, I love that you have this positive outlook. Like you understand that you did some dumb things, you made some bad choices, but you don't have to like stay stuck in those bad choices. You can just be like, you know
Yeah.
what? I did that. I wouldn't recommend it, but because it was a part of my story, my experience, I can take it for what it was and I can learn a lesson from it and grow and I can appreciate what is now. I think that's such
Hmm.
a healthy way to look at it cuz
Yeah.
sometimes our past can be really hard and we don't want to share with other people, but it's inspiring to hear like that were at the one place and look, it was that easy. You just needed a girl to put you in your place.
the
Yes.
right
That.
girl.
Yeah.
Right, the right girl.
Like I've been in a lot of different situations that I wish I would have never been in, but I'm also thankful because I wouldn't be where I am today without those situations
Mhm.
and being able to learn and grow and help the other, like the young men in our ward, if they ever get in that situation to where I can help them because I've been there. I know what they're going through.
And so maybe you
Awesome.
Um,
can maybe guide them so they don't go down some of those paths, right?
yeah.
So I have to just ask you a quick question because Brienne, obviously, she definitely needs a little starlight on her in this episode. Um, what would you say to the young women who might be listening to this podcast? I mean, obviously, her willingness to tell it what it like it was and to have those standards and to just be like, look, like obviously that must have been scary for her to think of losing out on you because you guys were friends as well as getting into this relationship. Like that's very, very scary sometimes, right? So what would you say to
Yeah.
the young women?
For the young women, I would just say before you, and this kind of applies to young men too, but for the young women, before you even start dating, know what your standards are, know what the church's standards are, to where you can hold yourself accountable into a higher standard than those of the rest of the world, and just know what you want as far as a family, a relationship, what you want in a husband, to where you don't even need a second guess. Oh, well, I really like this guy, but he's not a member. He does all this. Just hold yourself accountable and know that this is what you want, and whether it's with this person or not, that's where you're gonna be. Like how Brienne put it with me, like she's told me like I'm getting married in the temple. I'm not gonna be with anyone who's not going to church. So it's either you get your act together or see you later.
Well, obviously you
Oh,
made the right choice
Yeah.
yes, we
for
did.
talking today.
Yeah. And you guys really are a great couple and both of your families are just such good families. So I love that you got your happily ever after, right? You
Yeah.
know. You really, really did.
Well, do you have
Well,
any last thoughts or comments you'd like to share before we wrap things up?
I just say that everyone goes through trials in life. Um, just know that no matter what happens, you're always welcome back in the church. You have a heavenly Father who loves you no matter what, and
yeah.
He'll always accept you with open arms no matter what you've done. And it might just take the right person to help you get back on track. So if you're ever feeling down or not in the right place, just reach out to your friends and your family, and they can help you get back to where you want to be because it's very much well worth it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nick, so much for jumping on here and sharing your story today. And thank you for being such a great young men's leader to my boys. I really appreciate it. And they always love being able to go and hang out with you guys. And I think a lot of it has to do, with the leaders that have invested their time and love and energy into them. So we appreciate having you on the show today and you being so open.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate having this opportunity.
No problem.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. And
Thank you.
thank you everyone that's watched this story and been able to be a part of Nick's story now. We really appreciate you on the show as well. Um, if any of you have a story similar to Nick's, or you know of somebody that has an inspirational story that they'd like to share, go to latterdaylights.com and tell us about it, and we can get you on the show.
Well, yeah, and for our listeners, guys, please do us a favor. We cannot have this podcast be successful without you guys. So make sure that you are liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing, all of the ings that you can do. Make sure that you guys are doing that for our show. And especially sharing. If you guys can share the story, you have no idea who needs it, who's going to grow from it, who just kind of needs to be able to feel the spirit and feel like, hey, I'm not alone in this world. So we would really, really appreciate it if you guys wanted to show your love and support by doing any of those things for us.
Yeah.
I think that's all we have for today, right, Scott?
Yeah, well, going to what you just said, Alicia, it's been really a really cool experience starting this from nothing just a few
Yeah.
months ago and seeing how it's grown and how
Mhm.
people have shared it, and it's kind of taking on this life of its own, and it's been really cool to be a
Yeah.
part of it.
Yeah, very true. I was actually just going and I re-listened to some of our old episodes this last week, and I just thought, oh man, like I just want everyone to hear every single story. They're just Scott and I are spoiled because we get to hear them all, but you guys can do it too. So go check out some older episodes too after you listen to Nick's story today, and share some of those as well. They're good ones. They're good ones. So
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Nick, for being on the show. One of the cool things is once you've shared your story, it's on here for the future, and so people will see it over time, and you'll get to share that story to hundreds, maybe even thousands of people over the years. They'll be inspired by what you shared with us today. So thank you very much for having the courage to come on and share your light.
Yeah, thanks again for having me.
All right, guys. Well, we will see you guys next week. Let us know if you need anything or reach out to us if you've got a story to share too. See you later.
Thanks. Take care,
Thank you.
everybody.